AES 2006, and you know, when you come to a show like this, you run into people that you never expect to run into. I run into Geoff Emerick, legendary recording engineer, and Howard Massey, author, who have collaborated on a book by Geoff Emerick called Here, There, and Everywhere, which documents Geoff's time recording the Beatles, going way back in history and some of the most important recordings ever made in rock and roll. Geoff, thank you very much for speaking with us. I have a question. You know, this book is well, I mean, you know, what's the time frame that this book covers?
Well, the time frame goes from when I was 15 years old and started at EMI Studios, which is now Abbey Road Studios, and through to through the whole Beatle career up until well, you know, the Abbey Road basically, and
there's a chapter on Band on the Run.
Yeah, Band on the Run.
Oh, Band on the Run.
Yeah, and so forth. So we sort of stopped around about that time, and there's a little synopsis of my life from there to, you know, from then to now. But you know, there's room for more books, I guess.
Was EMI equipped with multi-tracks at the time you started working there?
No, 4-track was just sort of sneaking in, and my early recordings, some of them were just straight stereo. Yeah.
Nice, nice. What kind of compression were you commonly using at that time?
Compressors were Altex, and the limiters were Fairchild 660s, as I'm sure everyone knows.
So, looking back to the earliest times when you were working with the Beatles and George Martin, what would you say in terms of contribution, you know, behind the mixing desk? What's the one thing that pops out at you as something that really that you point to all these years later and remember that moment?
Well, I mean, the contribution was when I was promoted to be their recording engineer, which was the first album that I engineered was Revolver, and my sort of synopsis of the whole thing was they didn't want to record in a fashion that they were fed up with recording in a normal way, with, you know, a mic here and a mic there and blah 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 blah. So I had to sort of change the whole system, and I had sounds in my head. So I experimented with mic techniques, which was basically putting the mics in close to the instruments and inside the instruments. And when we cut Tomorrow Never Knows, you know, John Lennon wanted the sound of the Dalai Lama singing on a mountaintop, you know, 50 miles away. And then, you know, I saw the Leslie speaker spinning in front of me, and thought, well, if we could cut into the circuitry and put the vocal through that, then we could maybe get a different sound for the voice. And it all sort of started from there, you know. Terrific. And John was sort of won over from then, you know, because I was like 19 at the time, so, you know. And they did not know, I don't think at that time, that Norman Smith, the original engineer, was not going to be there anymore. So that was it.
I remember hearing some story about involving putting a microphone in water.
Oh yeah. That was when we were doing Yellow Submarine, and you know, I'd do anything to keep them happy, you know. And John wanted to sing underwater and blah blah blah, you know. And so we ended up, you know, putting a 56 in a condom into a bottle of water.
Nice.
Which didn't really work.
Did you keep the track? Is it in the?
No. I don't think so. I don't think so. It was too muffled.
Howard, how did you and Geoff meet?
I interviewed Geoff for EQ magazine, and we just kind of hit it off and stayed in touch. And I don't know, a year or two later, Geoff,
I like the way Howard wrote. You know, like the best. I was always weary of doing interviews, and Howard just was such a great writer, and that's how it really came together.
So when he asked me if I'd like to do a book with him, it took me about a tenth of a second to say yes, please. And we spent 5 years working on this book.
That was going to be my next question. 5 years, huh? An incredible amount of material, I'm sure. Having to winnow through it all. Was access to any of the equipment, access to any of the information or records, was that an issue?
No, I didn't want to get involved with all that. It's not that sort of technical, and it's not in depth as regards that sort of stuff. But what we did do was to bring all my old assistants, you know, like Richard Lush, who came from Australia, and John Smith came down from Canada. And we sat there and just reminisced, and you've got to imagine and remember that working on those albums, and at that time, all those moments that you read about in the book are so indelible on your mind that you never forget them. You can't forget them. You know, you really cannot.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it, fellas.
Pleasure.
Geoff Emerick.
Great.
Pleasure.
Howard Massey. Gearwire 2006.